is a language, older by far and deeper than words. It is the language of the earth, and it is the language of our bodies. It is the language of dreams and of action. It is the language of meaning and of metaphor. This language is not safe, as Jim Knowlman said of metaphor, and to believe in its safety is to diminish the importance of the embodied. Metaphors are dangerous because, if true, they open us to our bodies and thus to action, and because they slip, sometimes wordlessly, sometimes articulated, between the seen and unseen. This language of symbol is the umbilical cord that binds us to the beginning, to whatever is the source of who we are, where we come from, and where we return. To follow this language of metaphor is to trace words back to our bodies, back to the earth. We suffer from misperceiving the world. We believe ourselves separated from each other and from all others by words and by thoughts. We believe, rationally, we think, that we are separated by rationality, and that to perceive the world rationally is to perceive the world as it is. But perceiving the world as it is also to misperceive it entirely, to blind ourselves to an even greater body of truth. The world is a great dream. No, not fleeting, evanescent, unreal, immaterial, less than. These words do not describe even our dreams of night, but alive, vivid, every moment present to and pregnant with meaning, speaking symbolically. To perceive the world as we perceive our dreams would be to more closely perceive it as it is. The sky is crying, from joy or grief, I do not know. Waves in a wild river form bow-backed lovers and speak to me of union. Industrial civilization tears apart my insides. The world is speaking every moment of every day. And because so often it does not choose to speak English, or in the case of caged apes, American Sign Language, we choose to believe it does not speak. How sad. Our bodies speak too, and to them too, so often we choose not to listen. Our actions also speak to us of death. I've often wondered if the urge to destroy is really the desire to do away with a way of living that does not bring us joy. Perhaps what we want is to not destroy the world with plutonium, but to stop living the way we do. We know that to be reborn we must die, but we do not know what form this death must take. Having denied the existence of the spirit, it can't be measured in the laboratory, or at the very least, having attempted to sever the ties between spirit and flesh bringing the manly mind down from the heights, we have forgotten their interconnectedness.
The creative spirit is a force of nature growing within the human psyche that dreams of full-bodied expression. It moves through individuals, generations, and epochs. People gripped by the creative spirit are driven by an inner necessity to give outward form to what has taken hold of them within. Creative people offer themselves as instruments in service to the realization of this creative spirit. Our creativity, whose original source is beyond the ego, becomes the medium through which Christ, who embodies and is symbolic of our higher self, incarnates in our world. Creativity is a healthy response to the disease of vertigo. At the core of our being. In wrestling with our demons, we are asked to creatively give shape and form to the dark energies that animate our sickness, transforming these demons into something useful, in service to the good, and potentially into allies. It is in overcoming our illness that we access the creative spirit. In our creativity, it's as if we are, perhaps unknowingly, in possession of a magic wand that is powerful beyond measure. But not only do many of us not know how to use it to benefit ourselves and the world at large, most of us don't even suspect that we have such great creative power. Many of us are unconsciously wielding our creative genius to entrance ourselves into thinking that we're not in touch with our creativity. Divinely inspired creativity and archetypal evil exist juxtaposed in a state of superposition within the demonic. Which one actually manifests depends on whether we respond creatively or not. Jesus' saying comes to mind: if you bring forth what's within you will save you. If you don't bring forth what's within you will destroy you. Gospel of Thomas, saying 70. Vertical, bows, spurns and spurs. Our natural creativity. The mind virus is a creativity destroyer when not seen. When recognized, though, it unleashes our creative nature beyond imagination. Creative artists are somehow able to synthesize their most sublime, transcendental impulses within the darkness of the unconscious, shaping something entirely new as a result. All art, science, religion, and technology, everything that has ever been done, thought, imagined, or spoken, has its origin in the creative nature of our soul. Jungian psychologist and philosopher Eric Newman comments, "The self-generating creative power of the soul is man's true and final secret, by virtue of which he is made in the likeness of God the Creator." Creative artists don't reproduce and imitate nature. Rather, they produce in their own soul an analogous creative process that nature outwardly reflects. This fruitful creative center of the soul, that is typically identified with the creative divinity, is a never-ending source of renewal and rebirth, upon which the continued existence of culture and civilization depends.
Harry? Professor, sir, your bird,
There was nothing I could do. He just caught fire.
Oh, and about time too. He's been looking dreadful for days. Pity you had to see him on a burning day. Folks, he's a phoenix, Harry. They burst into flame when it is time for them to die, and then they are reborn from the ashes. Ah, fascinating creatures, phoenixes. They can carry immensely heavy loads, no doubt, but tears of healing powers.
Phoenix burning to rise from its own ashes, the snake shedding its old and dead skin, caterpillars forming cocoons, trees dropping leaves. Everyone understands that for there to be growth, there must always be a dying away. George Gurdjieff wrote, "A man may be born, but in order to be born, he must first die, and in order to die, he must first awake." Being born without dying is false and leads only to a reaffirmation and strengthening of the same impulses that drive us terrified toward death while disallowing us from entering that cleansing abyss. Dying without awakening is just as false, playing out as we see in the unquenchable cannibalism of the somnambular undead, those who enact a death wish never realizing that what they want to kill, or rather allow to die, is wholly inside. The trick is to walk that sharp line between death and life, and to allow yourself, with full cognizance the risks involved, to collapse, to let part of your life die so another may emerge, to dive as fully into death as you do life, to embrace it and let it embrace you. The notion of kairos is important not only to sleeping princesses in fairy tales and to their suitors, successful or dead. It applies to anyone who undergoes any death and who must then await the necessary rebirth. And I believe it applies just as surely to cultures, which too must die to a way of living so that when the time is right, they may reawaken, mature, ripe, and ready to enter into fully mutual adult relationships. Every creature on the planet must be hoping, at the very least selfishly, that our culture's time of awakening comes soon.
Our creativity, whose original source is beyond the ego, becomes the medium through which Christ, who embodies and is symbolic of our higher self, incarnates in our world. Creativity is a healthy response to the dis-ease of vertigo at the core of our being. In wrestling with our demons, we are asked to creatively give shape and form to the dark energies that animate our sickness, transforming these demons into something useful, in service to the good, and potentially into allies. It is in overcoming our illness that we access the creative spirit. In our creativity, it's as if we are, perhaps unknowingly, in possession of a magic wand that is powerful beyond measure. But not only do many of us not know how to use it to benefit ourselves and the world at large, most of us don't even suspect that we have such great creative power. Many of us are unconsciously wielding our creative genius to entrance ourselves into thinking that we're not in touch with our creativity. This is then immediately confirmed by the experiences we create for ourselves, which ironically demonstrates the enormity of our creative powers. Not knowing that we possess undreamed of creative powers, our power to create then possesses us from beneath our conscious awareness, which then fuels our worst nightmares, both of the sleeping and the waking variety. In genuine creativity, the potential for demonic evil within us is alchemically transmuted into creative ecstasy. The demonic evil is raw material, the prima materia, for the most sublime creativity, a creativity that recreates us and the world anew. Creativity is our true, essential, spiritual nature as human beings. If we don't alchemically transform this raw material through creative acts, however, it will kill us. The darkness calls on us to creatively intervene by changing the overall context that gave rise to it in the first place, thereby transmuting the darkness into fuel that feeds the creative fire of the human soul.
I don't believe it would have been possible for me to undergo a meaningful death and rebirth had I been working a wage job. There would not have been time. No one expects a caterpillar to spin a cocoon, pop in for 10 minutes, then emerge a butterfly, yet not many of us are willing or able to make the time necessary to begin asking the right questions about who we are, what we love, what we fear, and what we're doing to each other, much less answering these questions, and much less living them. I don't always know what the right questions are. I only know that they reside in my body, and that in order to discover them, or better, remember, I need to be still. I didn't know how to live, only how not to live. I knew a job wasn't what I wanted or needed. We did not evolve working for others 40 hours or more per week. We evolved, and one need only look at non-humans or at remaining indigenous peoples to see this is so, spending a great deal of time doing not much of anything, or, once again, in the lingo of bee research, loafing. As the Dane Frederick Anderson Bowling said of the Khoi Khoi of South Africa, they find it strange that we, the Christians, work, and they say that we are all mortal, that we gain nothing from our toil, but at the end are thrown underground so that all we have done is in vain. Another colonist noted of these same people that their contempt for riches is in reality nothing but their hatred for work. And a third remarked that the principal work of men is to laze about. Had I encountered these comments in my 20s, they would have encouraged me by helping to blunt the voice inside. What's the matter? Lazy? Looking back, I can put a positive spin on my activities, or lack thereof, of those years by calling it a period of pupation, or saying I was undergoing a death and rebirth, or calling it my own 40 days in the wilderness. But the truth is that for the next few years, living first in Nevada and later in Idaho, I didn't actually do much of anything. I felt guilty about this, but I couldn't find anything to do that interested me more than nothing. I certainly wasn't going to go back to physics or any other means of selling my hours. I called myself a writer, but didn't write much. What was I going to write? I didn't have anything to say because I didn't know who I was. To discover that takes long, slow, uninterrupted time. Time enough to get bored and then to move beyond boredom, which is really just another screen to deflect our attention away from the arduous yet delightful, joyous though painful process of allowing ourselves the stillness to remember what we feel and to begin assuming responsibility for our lives. Nearly every day I walked the railroad tracks to the Humboldt River, then climbed down to the concrete footing of a bridge. There I sat in the sunlight and read, or more often just watched the river. I walked the banks, and in the spring saw a mother bird feign a broken wing to distract me from her nest. I saw beetles crawling in and out of a beaver dead on the tracks, and I saw the beaver's teeth, orange as carrots. I saw plenty of trains. Albert Einstein once observed that the significant problems of the world cannot be solved at the same level of consciousness at which they were created. I think he's right. I believe Carl Jung was onto much the same thing when he wrote, "All the greatest and most important problems of life are fundamentally insoluble. They can never be solved, but only outgrown. This outgrowing proved on further investigation to require a new level of consciousness. Some higher or wider interest appeared on the patient's horizon, and through this broadening of his or her outlook, the insoluble problem lost its urgency. It was not solved logically in its own terms, but faded when confronted with a new and stronger life urge." The first statement points out to me why there must always be a death for there to be a meaningful transition, one that sticks. We do not easily give up our acquired ways of being, even when they're killing us. That level of consciousness had to play itself out to the end, or rather to an end. Only when that mindset had, like a plant in a too small pot, exhausted its own possibilities did I begin casting about for another way to be. Only when I no longer had any real choice, far past the time when what little choice there was, death or change, had become all too painfully obvious, did I begin to reject the earlier mindset. This is why I don't think our culture will stop before the world has been impoverished beyond our most horrifying imaginations. The second statement reveals to me why the period of hibernation takes so long. We do not stand in front of a tree shouting, "Grow, damn you, grow!" And we recognize the futility of wishing a broken foot to heal in a day. But in myself and in so many of my friends, I've encountered an unwillingness to acknowledge that even having sloughed off an old level of consciousness, it takes a long time to grow a new one. It could be argued that my own railing against the culture exhibits the same blindness to process as that of a person yelling at a broken foot. The culture is broken, and shouting ain't gonna fix it. And I need to do whatever I can to stop the damage. It's a fine line to walk, that of waiting for the arrival of understanding, for kairos, and the need for action. I am active now. In my 20s, I was not. I believe my present level of energy is a result of having fallen deeply into my lethargy then. Had there been no time of sleep, there could not now be this time of awakening. But instead, I would still be as I was before, turning most of my energy inward to maintain the imprisonment of my own emotions. I need to now step away from much of what I've just been saying. To believe for a moment that what I was doing in Nevada and after constituted lazing about or inaction makes plain another form of silencing, once again of the unseen. Hidden here is the absurd presumption that to flip burgers or repair televisions is more important and difficult than to shake off the effects of a coercive upbringing and education, and insofar as possible to vomit out the internalized voices of a coercive and deeply violent culture. This is but one more way we value production over life. We do what we reward, and we reward what we value. All fancy philosophy aside, we value asking someone if they would like fries with their burger more than we value a rich and healthy emotional and spiritual life and a vital community. Of course, the former does not threaten the foundations of our culture. All choices involve the loss of unembraced opportunities. The time I spend trying to understand and stem the pervasive destructiveness of the culture cannot be spent shoveling fries. And were I to mix milkshakes, I could not spend that time learning how to listen to coyotes, trees, aphids, dogs, the dream giver, or my disease. Just as Cleve Baxter can name the moment when his consciousness forever changed,